Hey, what's happening? My name is Luke Mel. I'm up in Anchorage, Alaska, and I'm gonna spend a couple minutes today walking you through how to roll a Packraft. I get a bunch of questions about this. I'm always a little bit torn putting much attention or time toward it because I think the roll is a little bit of a party trick for Packrafts. I think it's a lot more important to be able to do a wet re-entry and to practice that skill. Certainly having a roll lets you get upright, recover from a capsize a lot more quickly, which is what you want. But unless that roll is bomb-proof, unless you're guaranteed to get up, it can become a hazard. I've seen this a few times, a few scary times, and done it a bunch myself too, where I try to roll, I miss the first time, I try a second, I try a third. Meanwhile, I'm drifting down, or somebody else is drifting down toward the next rapid, and then probably swim the next rapid. So that sucks. But that said, it's fun to try, and there are a handful of guys and gals that have this, like a 95% confidence on their roll, and it's sweet. It's inspiring to see. So let's talk a little bit about the boat itself. We have to fight the buoyancy of our boats compared to a kayak, and a few things that'll make rolling easier. It's basically like you can ask yourself the question: is your boat easy to capsize? If it is, then it's probably pretty easy or easier to roll back up as well. A boat that's very stable is going to be a lot harder to roll back into that stable position. So those factors are the width of the boat, like how wide the cockpit is, and for us that largely comes down to the tube diameter on these lateral tubes. So a boat that is narrow with a smaller diameter tube is going to be easier to roll. That's what this is. This is a whitewater model, Alpaca Wolverine, and it's a lot easier to roll than, say, their narwhal, which has a wider diameter tube. Other consideration is the outfitting. It's pretty much not even worth trying without thigh straps. There was a guy once that rolled without thigh straps, as far as I know. The rest of us need the straps. And this has the stock Alpaca 4-piece thigh strap. I had a 2-piece kind of homemade strap for a number of years. That works fine. The 4th piece does hold your knee tighter to the hull. What you're after here is a coupling between your body and the hull, so that when you get on edge, when you lean your boat, the boat comes with you. You'll need to be able to do that to roll. You want to be able to do that for any technical water, class 3, class 4 water. That coupling is pretty critical. These straps do a great job of providing that coupling. I see a lot of people get in and out of their boats. They just kind of slip their thigh straps over their knees real loosely, and I think that's a little bit of a disservice. I mean, the point is that it's supposed to really hold your knee in tight. I'm talking about performance. If you're not doing performance paddling, don't get it so tight that it's uncomfortable. If you want to roll, these have to be really tight. The one concern with that is entrapment. You wouldn't ever want to do something to your boat or use what somebody else thinks should be in your boat if it feels like it might hold you in the boat when you're underwater. These straps, I'm very confident I can get out just by straightening my legs. But that's really important to know and to test before you get somewhere scary. Another consideration is that we need to finish our roll. This is a little bit different than what the kayakers do. Fully splayed out on the stern like this. And so if you're wearing a throw rope, like this is what I usually wear, if I've got it around my back there, it prevents me from getting as close to the hull as I want. I'll actually take this and I'll wear it up front under my vest so that I can get closer to the boat. You might have other considerations with the buoyancy of your vest, or the boat that you're working with. But you're going to have to be able to get all the way onto your back like that to complete the roll. Okay, so that's enough about equipment. I think it's helpful to kind of break down the roll in terms of its physics. I'm a bit of a dork here about this, but what we're talking about is using the paddle as a lever arm. And we'll take that lever arm and get it out on the water in a position where and use it to generate the torque necessary to rotate the boat. The boat's going to rotate around this axis of rotation. The paddle is the lever arm that lets us do that rotation, do that work. So there's a few considerations. One is that if you think about torque in terms of physics, it depends on two variables: the length of the lever arm and the angle that the lever arm makes with respect to the axis of rotation. So in terms of length, I get a lot more leverage out like this than I do in here. Or I've got a sea kayak paddle here for this demonstration just to show you. It's an easier roll because it's such a long paddle, and it'll show you the basics of it more effectively than me using my whitewater paddle. As far as the angle relative to the axis of rotation, I can't get much leverage here because that's a small angle relative to that axis of rotation. My maximum angle, 90 degrees perpendicular to the boat, that's where I can get the leverage that I need, the most leverage, the most torque to complete the roll. So that's the lever arm part of what's going on. And then in terms of the actual rotation, rotation depends on the distribution of mass, like where there's mass, how far that mass is from the axis of rotation. So the classic analogy here is the figure skater on ice. They can start spinning with their arms out, and maybe they're moving slowly in these rotations. They pull their arms in, pull their leg in toward that axis of rotation, and they start moving more quickly. In other words, it's easier for them to spin when that mass is brought in toward that axis. Same thing on the boat. If I tried to spin with my torso upright, good posture, I'm up here, I've got all this mass really far away from that axis of rotation. That's going to work against me. That's why we're going to need to come up out of the water, basically plastered to the deck. Okay, the exercise that I recommend, that was super useful for me to get comfortable with that idea of plastering yourself to the deck, is to come into a pool, or I'm here at a lake with a dock, and set up on the side of the pool or the dock, hands on the deck. Let me change this angle a little bit. Both hands here, and what you're going to do is you're going to flip yourself into the water and back out, but you're going to maintain your arms on the deck or the edge of the pool. Let me get this skirt tied up. Okay, so hands on the edge of the pool, and you're going to just flip the boat into the water with your hips and use your hips to get back upright. The point of this exercise is to build muscle memory for what your knees and hips need to do to turn the boat from upside down to right side up. So just flip-flop here. If you want to, notice how much harder it is here. I'll try that upright position, mass farther away from that axis of rotation. If I try to correct from here, oh gosh, I basically can't do it. It's really hard. My body wants to lay back. Like, I can feel that's the right position to be in. And I think it's a good exercise here to try to keep your ear in the water. You're really just leading with this hip. This is useful too. I got comfortable doing it with two hands. Try it with one hand. Try it with 3 fingers. You know, work your way into a position where you can efficiently as possible rotate your boat back into upright. That's the key to your roll. Your hips are going to do that based on the torque you get from the paddle, and the rest of your body should just follow your hips. You're leading with your hips. This is counterintuitive. This is the hardest part. We're so used to leading with our head in whitewater, right? You're looking at that rapid. In biking and skiing, everything, leading with our head. This is a time when we can't. We lead with our hips, and our head's the last thing to come out of the water. We want the boat to pull our head out of the water. From here. Okay? And then you do that on your other side as well. That's building muscle memory for the hip snap. I think with that said, I'll get in the water and we'll work with the lever arm. You can think of this roll, and this is the C2C roll. I think it's the only real viable option for us in Packrafts. We're going to think of it in 3 phases. And the phases are going to be the setup, getting the paddle into the lever arm position, and then the hip snap. I'm going to start with this long sea kayak paddle. So step 1, the setup. When you're underneath the water, you're going to set up by crunching your torso onto the hull of your boat as much as possible. I'm leaning forward. I'm trying to get all of this mass close to my axis of rotation, close to the surface of the water. Standing tall is just going to defeat you here. You're underwater. So I'm in here. Both arms push the paddle up so that it can rest on the surface of the water. It's going to be parallel to the boat. I'm going to have this power face of the blade down on the surface of the water. That's my setup. Okay? Forward, to the side, crunch, crunch, crunch. Punching this through with both arms. Both hands are anchored onto the hull, and that can be useful to kind of get a position where you're like, yep, that's my starting position. Where are my thumbs? Something pressed into the hull. Okay, after the setup, you're going to need to move the paddle into the lever arm position. This is hard to describe, hard to illustrate when I'm not upside down, hard to illustrate when I am upside down. But basically what you have to do is pivot this blade out to that 90-degree position. And I'm going to do that by keeping this back hand, this back thumb on the hull, and I'm going to keep my elbow pinned into my ribs. That's all for the back hand as that front hand spins out to 90. What that does, keeping the hand on the hull, keeping the elbow in, is it protects this shoulder from injury. I'm going to do all that. I'm going to snap this thing out to that 90-degree position, and then I'm ready for step 3, which is the hip snap. And the hip snap is intended to catch that paddle blade. It's to catch it out here, like a same as a brace, right? A low brace or a high brace. Same idea here. I'm going to use that brace, that lever arm, out here, and I'm going to catch it with my hips, making the hip snap. Hip snap is going to turn my boat to a vertical, on edge, on side position, and then the boat's going to start flipping over into its upright position, and that's this critical balance point where you have to transition from having hugged your bow up here, haul the bow leaning forward, rotating all the way back to come up, strapped onto the stern, head coming out of the water last. Okay, that's a lot of the words. Let's try some of the rolls. Okay, 3 steps. Set up, lever arm, hip snap. Okay, I tried to keep my head in the water as long as possible. That's pretty critical. One trick while you're learning this is to choke back on the handle. Give yourself as much a lever arm as possible. I'll do that here. I'm not sure it'll be obvious to you that it's easier for me to roll up. The hard part with the lever arm is you really want it to be on the surface of the water. If I try to snap my hips when the lever arm is slicing through the water, I lose all my torque. I really can't generate force like that. So that's the part that takes practice. It's really effective to have a friend in the pool with you, help you get that paddle into the lever arm position, and they can even just hold it there while you work your hips a little bit and get a feel for that. It's pretty hard to develop that on your own. One more consideration is that when you come up out of the water, if you're splayed out on the back deck, you're in a terrible position to stabilize when you hit the next boat. So you need to come up, after finishing that stroke, you want to lean forward, back in your aggressive stance and ready to low brace or paddle in the water. Another thing that is tricky with these rolls is there's a lot of value to hesitation. So you flip over and you're in a bunch of frothy, aerated water, you just can't get the same force you need off of froth compared to hard, dense water. You can try that, try the roll, but you might miss it, or you might get it just barely and come up off balance, and then the next little bump knocks you back over. So it can be really important to time that roll, to hesitate until you feel things chill out. It's scary because that whole time you're underwater, your head's on the bottom. That's part of why it's so important to be in this position for the setup. You're protecting everything. Your face protected by your helmet, your back protected by your PFD, as opposed to hanging out waiting like this, where you're just asking to get hit by stuff. So I'm up here waiting, it chills out, move from setup to lever arm, snap my hips. Get upright and ready for whatever's coming next. Okay, Packraft roll. Start in a pool, move up to some slow moving deep water, and then practice on harder and harder stuff till you feel like you got it bomber. Good luck. Don't forget that that wet re-entry is probably more important, even if this is cooler. Okay, thanks for watching.